China has condemned a new security deal between the US, the UK and Australia, saying it shows a Cold War mentality. The leaders of the three countries say the agreement would promote stability in the Indo-Pacific region. The US Secretary of State has described France as a vital partner after French ministers reacted angrily to Australia scrapping its multi-billion-dollar deal to buy French submarines in favour of nuclear-powered vessels using American and British technology. New mandatory COVID-19 vaccine rules in France has meant 3,000 health workers have been suspended without pay. The French health minister said most of the suspensions are only temporary, with many now agreeing to get jabbed. And Italy's become the first European country to make it compulsory for workers to have a COVID pass showing a proof of vaccination, a negative test, or recovery from the virus.
Australia's Prime Minister announces a deal to use U.S. nuclear submarines as part of a new security partnership with the U.S. and Britain. North Korea says it successfully launched a missile from a train for the first time following missile tests Wednesday. In France, officials announced the death of the leader of Islamic State in the Sahel. President Emmanuel Macron said the French military killed the man Wednesday. And a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket carried 4 American civilians into Earth orbit late Wednesday from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
And the FDA could decide on booster shots for the general public as soon as tomorrow. Pfizer says the vaccine's efficacy diminishes after several months, but some FDA scientists argue the current 2-dose regimen still offers enough protection. Meanwhile, COVID hospitalizations are hitting record highs in 9 states. ABC's Whit Johnson has the latest.
The looming question of whether vaccinated Americans are ready for booster shots could be answered as early as tomorrow, when an FDA panel is expected to vote on a recommendation. This morning, Pfizer is making the case that a third shot is needed for those 16 and older, about 6 months after receiving their second dose.
What we've seen is increases in cases and breakthrough cases as time goes on, just because of a waning immunity. And this is why this booster question is coming into play right now.
Pfizer also suggesting the reduction in vaccine protection is likely not due to the Delta variant, but instead vaccine effectiveness decreases with increasing time since being fully vaccinated. Pfizer saying vaccine efficacy against symptomatic disease was 96% a week after the second dose, but then dropped to nearly 84% after 4 months. But some at the FDA have responded with skepticism, arguing in its report accompanying Pfizer's data that the vaccines at their currently approved doses still afford protection against severe COVID-19 disease and death in the United States. Moderna citing new data saying people who received its vaccine should get a third dose as well.
It's not the kind of thing that you want to miss by 6 months. You'd rather be a little too early than a little too late, because ultimately lives are at stake.
Moderna following Pfizer's 6-month timeline, but says its booster will only be a half dose, arguing that provides more than enough protection. The conversation over booster shots heating up as COVID-19 cases and deaths continue to climb. Hospitalizations in 9 states hitting new record highs, including Washington, where doctors have been treating overflow patients from neighboring states, now with a dire warning that space is running out.
If we get to the point where we can no longer accept patients, you're going to have patients that die as a result of lack of available care.
Now, the Biden administration's timeline for booster shots on September 20th might be delayed because another step in this process goes through a CDC panel, and they're not meeting until next Wednesday. So boosters likely won't be available until late next week at the earliest. But the White House says they're ready to roll out those shots to 80,000 locations across the country if approved. Diane?
All right, Whit Johnson, thanks for that. An emergency physician and ABC News medical contributor Dr. Darian Sutton is here with more on all of this. So, Dr. Sutton, what is the FDA considering as they weigh these booster shots, and what is the process to get it to full authorization?
Great question. So tomorrow the FDA is discussing the information or validity on whether or not we need a booster, but I just want to clear up some basic concepts. There's no argument on whether or not we should get a booster, because we can't expect that vaccines are 100% infinite in terms of their durability. The question is when is the best time to give the booster? Is it now, or do we wait to see the possibility of waning effectiveness in the future? And that's what that research that comes from Pfizer is. That's why it's helpful, because they see that there's a slight wane in the efficacy, or the effectiveness of the vaccine over time, but it doesn't simply go away. And vaccines are still proving to be incredibly effective. So that is a lot of the controversy right now. Not if we need a booster, just simply when.
And we've heard a lot of people saying the priority right now is getting the unvaccinated vaccinated. So what do you say to the criticism that booster shots, those doses, instead should go to countries that need vaccine if we have a surplus?
I absolutely agree with that. When we think about vaccine equity, it is of utmost importance, especially in the setting of this global pandemic. We have countries going through uncontrolled transmission, and when that happens, it leads to the increased possibility of a new variant that can be developed in the future that can negatively affect all of the hard work that we've done. So I do think that the priority should be on the unvaccinated, especially those countries who have incredibly low vaccination rates and many people desperate to get the vaccine. And then beyond that, we can look at those who are high risk who got vaccinated. And that includes my patients who are older than the age of 65, my patients who are immune compromised, immune suppressed, or people like me who are constantly exposed to highly infectious people.
Now, will they be put in a separate category in this evaluation?
Who?
The immune compromised, the elderly, et cetera, people who maybe weren't able to form as robust an immune response to the 2 doses.
Now, that is when the next step of the process happens. So tomorrow, the FDA decides on the approval, and then the CDC next week will come up with clinical recommendations. And during that time, they will make recommendations. These are career scientists who talk to doctors like me about what is best for the general public. So we'll probably...
Hello, and thanks for joining us on NHK Newsline. I'm Yoshio Ogasawara in Tokyo. North Korea's state-run TV has shown video footage of missiles launched from a train on Wednesday. Korean Central Television aired the video on Thursday evening. Its report said a newly created railway-borne missile regiment transported the weapons to a mountainous area in central North Korea early Wednesday. Experts in South Korea say the missiles shown are likely the ones fired on Wednesday in the direction of the Sea of Japan. Japanese defense officials say at least 2 missiles are estimated to have flown around 750 kilometers on irregular trajectories and fell inside Japan's exclusive economic zone. Turning to Myanmar, where a call by the opposition National Unity Government for an uprising against the junta has sparked a series of attacks on police and military posts, resulting in scores of casualties. The NUG's foreign minister told NHK in an interview that they had no choice but to declare the revolt against military rule last week.
In such a situation, the people had no choice. They have to protect their villages, their towns, their homes, and themselves.
Zin Mar Aung says the NUG realized the civilians were defenseless after the junta responded to their peaceful protests with violence. She also says the declaration was made as the NUG had learned of the military's plans with the monsoon season about to end.
We received information that they were preparing the biggest military operation in Myanmar's history. Under the circumstances, there was nothing left to do but to move forward with the revolution.
On the country's diplomatic front, Zin Mar Aung says the NUG continues to support Myanmar's ambassador to the United Nations, Cho Mong-tung. The military fired him from the post earlier this year after he criticized the regime. The UN General Assembly will decide who should represent the country after hearing from a screening committee.
Any new UN representative will not represent the people and will not be accepted by the people. Cho Mo-tun is the most deserving of representatives.
Zin Mar Aung says the international community should recognize the NUG as Myanmar's legitimate government. A fourth contender has joined the race for leader of Japan's main ruling party, which will effectively choose the country's next prime minister. The latest announcement comes just one day before the leadership campaign officially kicks off.
Women, children, seniors, and people with disabilities have not been leading players in our country. But Japan must become a society where they can live a full life as essential members. I want to lead the Liberal Democratic Party to achieve that goal through conservative policies.
Noda Seiko is a 9-time lower house member. She served as a party executive and held several cabinet positions, including Minister of Posts and Telecommunications and Internal Affairs Minister. She'll face 3 other contenders: Kishida Fumio, a former chairperson of the party's Policy Research Council, Kono Taro, Japan's Regulatory Reform Minister, and Takaichi Sanae, a former Internal Affairs Minister. The vote is scheduled for September 29th. The government is planning to open a diet session on October 4th to elect a new prime minister. Friday marks 19 years since North Korea admitted to its abductions of Japanese nationals. At least a dozen of the victims have yet to come home. Their families are urging the Japanese government to resolve the issue while they're still alive. The mother of one abductee told NHK she's losing hope.
When I think about how long it's taking and about the Japanese government, I feel empty in a way that's close to despair.
This is Yokota Sakie's daughter, Megumi. She was abducted to North Korea in 1977 at the age of 13. Japanese officials say at least 17 citizens were abducted by North Korean agents in the 1970s and 1980s. The North Korean government acknowledged the abductions for the first time at a bilateral summit in 2002. 5 of the victims came home later that year. The other 12, including Megumi, are still unaccounted for. Family members have campaigned for decades to bring their children and siblings back home. Yokota Sakie says most of the parents have died. She's urging the Japanese government to do more, including holding another summit to directly press the North Korean authorities. Weather officials say a powerful storm could make landfall in western Japan on Friday. Forecasters say the system known as Severe Tropical Storm Chanthu is stronger than expected and has changed direction. The storm has been lingering in the East China Sea. Japan's meteorological agency says the front is already dumping rain on southern parts of the country. More than 700 millimeters of rain fell in Miyazaki Prefecture over the 72 hours through 7 p.m. Thursday. Officials are warning that rain and winds could suddenly intensify as the storm approaches western Japan on Friday. It's expected to move towards Tokyo over the weekend. They're advising people in the storm's path to be on alert. West Japan Railway plans to suspend the Shinkansen bullet train service between Hakata and Hiroshima stations from Friday afternoon. To get the latest information, we turn to our meteorologist, Sayaka Mori.
Hello there. Although Chanthu is still over the East China Sea, it's enhancing the frontal system, so we are seeing record-breaking heavy rainfall over parts of Kyushu. Miyazaki Airport saw over 730 millimeters of rain in 72 hours. That's the all-time record. Heavy rain is expected to continue for the next couple of days because Chanthu is expected to make landfall in parts of the Kyushu region probably on Friday evening local time. And then instead of moving over the Sea of Japan, it's going to drift over the archipelago from the west to the east. It's likely to affect central Japan, including Tokyo, on Saturday. Wind gusts could be 126 kilometers per hour in the western areas, so secure your outside items. Heavy rain could batter the west and central Japan. We could see up to 500 millimeters of rain over Shikoku and 400 millimeters millimeters for parts of Kyushu, Tokai, and the Kinki region. So heavy rain could cause flooding as well as landslides. Strong winds could overturn vehicles. High waves could cause some coastal inundation. After the system moves through, Tokyo and Osaka will see unusually hot conditions. The highs could be in the 30s next week, so it's going to be summer-like next week. That's it for me. Stay safe.